Michael, there's a lot going on. We talked yesterday, about certain critical things that seem to be now introduced into the American zeitgeist that have kind of been verboten for a long time. I'll give you one example: the Supreme Court with the federal funding of religious schools. I mean, this may be again, the court hasn't ruled completely on it, but it looks as though this might be the beginning of what had been something that would never have been sanctioned or countenanced, I think, in prior administrations.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I think that first of all, we don't know. You're right. We don't know how the court's going to rule, but the people that watch the court more closely than we do on a daily basis are able to glean from different questions and the demeanor and posture of different justices what way they are going to vote. And it seems, in fact, that you're right that they're going to allow in Oklahoma a Catholic school, a private school, to get a private religious school to use state funds for that. And I think that we saw a hint of that in a Maine case, which to my detriment, I mentioned the other day when we talked about this. However, I also said I don't know all the details of the Maine case. I've got to look them up. It was a case from about 2, 3 years ago, and I didn't look them up. But it was a similar type of case in Maine where it was about having a charter school that was taking some funds that were public funds in order to have it continue operating. And so there seems to be a lean toward that in the effort on the conservative side to help make education in this country better, but also to get religion back into schools. And, they could do it in one fell swoop. They can take down the Department of Education while at the same time use the courts to get religion much more aligned with schools in terms of spending federal dollars there. And then, these are the results of that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the Department of Education because McMahon, what is it, Linda McMahon? She was mentioning that this is something very important. Finally, we get good religious teaching into some of these schools, and why shouldn't the U.S. government support that, et cetera? So,
Right.
that's kind of the party line at the moment. And
It's also, Mark, been the
yeah,
party line for decades. I mean, prayer in school is essentially the grandfather of this, the fight to keep prayer in school, to mandate prayer in school. It goes back even to the "In God We Trust" on our currency. These sorts of arguments are not unfamiliar to this court, but the court is and now has a makeup that's more receptive to these arguments.
it's such a good point. I mean, it's maybe creep
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
creep that we've seen, the slow creep, and this all of a sudden, the dam breaks. But I, speaking of messaging and speaking of those things that the administration, gets out there, it looks like the messaging around the economy is changing. The kind of I'm going to rescue you on day one. You're going to just see all the prices and all this inflationary stuff just go away in the first hour that I'm president. I may not even need to be president to be. This is obviously, it was a falsehood when he said it. It was just blowing sunshine when he said it. It seemed he must have known that, I would suggest. I mean, but more to the point, now with the economy not only not rescued by a president, but horribly damaged by a president who seems committed to some horribly flawed policies, the new messaging is we may have to wait a while. There are going to be some tough times. This Christmas is going to be a little tougher than Christmases past. It's an odd line from a guy who usually is just blowing that sunshine, right? So
It is, but
yeah.
in his mind, it's also a setup for December 13th press conference or appearance or rally. Remember when I told you back in the spring that Christmas might not be so good? Look at how good Christmas is. So they can manufacture whatever kind of numbers they want in December to talk about how good Christmas is. I mean, this is the way that the Donald Trump White House has always worked. And in fairness, it's the way a lot of White Houses work, is they set you up for low expectations. The problem that he had was setting everybody up for high expectations and then not delivering on them. And so he's going back to what is a more traditional presidential posture when it comes to over promising, under promising is always the best, because then you can tell them with great surprise that things are much better than we had predicted, and that creates a different kind of almost exponential relief from the public.
Yeah,
Someone did this to spoil our Christmas.
yes, exactly.
And somebody just said, or to blame Biden in advance, which is,
right.
which
No,
is
it's
true too.
So true. Michael, we're talking about this whole religious thing. Mark, you know, this religious commission, the commission to which Dr. Phil was just appointed, Michael. Mark, you know, this religion commission will be used to keep the religious wrong happy and I'm sorry, keep the religious wrong happy and go along with the autocracy now underway. I see those you mean that are not in the extreme right wing part.
Well, I think they're calling the religious wrong. It's a play on the religious right.
No, I get that, but what do they mean? So religious wrong is everybody who's not Christo-fascist, right?
Right. Yeah. So that they're gonna have them be happy even with a touch of moderation, or have them go along with whatever, if you're talking about Christo-fascism happening under the watch of Dr. Phil and others, then they'll be happy either way, is the way I read that. But I don't know. I just know that the religious right in America are the savviest of the organized political coalitions, and they will do whatever it takes to get them what they want, and they change their minds with a wink and a nod on candidates and on policy if they think it has a long term beneficial effect for them, such as not supporting Donald Trump, then all of a sudden supporting Donald Trump, getting three conservative justices, overturning Roe v. Wade, having religion back on the docket at the Supreme Court. All of these things work out for them. And I always contrast it to the very far left in the Democratic Party that let the perfect get in the way of the good. The religious right doesn't do that.
Yeah, that's so correct. I was saying before, it's transactional. So much is transactional. And I wonder, Michael, I'll just push this along. This is a question that I took a whack at within the last hour. It was asked, will history judge Trump harshly and this administration harshly for what they've done? And I'll kind of just offer it up to you in the same way it was offered to me, and then I'll tell you what I said. But go ahead.
I hope I live long enough to know that history judges Donald Trump the way he ought to be judged. It takes a while for presidential history to be written in America. Only now are people looking back at the administrations of George H.W. Bush and Jimmy Carter and saying that on balance they weren't as bad as advertised, and they're taking a look at people like Ronald Reagan and saying, perhaps not as glorious as advertised. So it does take a while for that history to be written. I think that if Donald Trump changes the presidency permanently and not just limited to his presidency or perhaps the one that succeeds him if it's from the Republican Party, then I think that they will judge him harshly. But if he succeeds in sort of passing along and making his personality and his way of ruling, which I don't think will happen, by the way, an enduring thing, then I think that the people who judge that will say that he had an impact on the presidency and changed the way we govern America. I don't think that's going to happen, because I think everything with him is unwitting and personal and done with a chip on his shoulder and with vendettas and retribution in mind all the time. And I don't think that's certainly not what has defined the presidency for the most part for the first 250 years of the country.
Right. And I'm
telling you, these countries are calling us out, kissing my ass.
Yeah. So what you end up with him doing, I think, is a lot of damage potentially, such that I think, and this is what I was saying, I mean, the trail of breadcrumbs to him is so clear. I don't think you can have a whole revisionist view in 30 years as to what happened in 2025. You know what I mean?
No question. And the nice thing about presidential, executive orders is they're the most easily undone things in politics and in governance. So that's a great thing that people who are opposed to the president have, is that just about everything is temporary. What isn't temporary, like I've talked about before, is how he has changed our perception of media and how we get our information. That is enduring and that is dangerous. And I think probably there's a permanence to a lot of it too, unfortunately.
I saw this that the Senate has, because I'm a tree hugger, I care about this, but we should all care, I think, about the fact that the Senate is voting to overturn the EPA rule that limits 7 hazardous air pollutants. I mean, this is the business now of the EPA, is essentially
Right.
undoing the protections that gave us cleaner air.
Yeah.
And
Operative
so,
word there, business. And that's
yeah,
what.
thank
Yeah,
you. That's exactly right.
and
It was a 52-46 party line vote, and it was the first time in the 55-year history of the Clean Air Act that Congress has moved to weaken the power of this law.
yeah.
It's the way we're going now, Michael.
It is the way we're going. It's the way there is a seesaw to it as well, right? I mean, when Democratic administrations come in, they do less of this, and that was one of the appeals to a lot of moderate Democrats of Jeb Bush, going back into his brief and now almost satirical run for president because of what Donald Trump did to him. But Jeb Bush, as governor of Florida, was a little more environmentally sound, and a lot of people thought, I mean, he was not a dream to environmentalists, but in comparison to what we've seen since and what was on the table then, and what people thought then was that, okay, maybe the Republicans are taking a turn toward moderation on the environment and they're listening up because of offshore drilling and some of the compromises he made. Well, that didn't happen, obviously, and that hard right turn has stayed hard right, and it does seesaw. So when a Democrat comes in, they try and lift some of this. They protect wildlife and wildlife refuges and all of that. But what the problem that there is right now is that there's no pushback possible on votes, and certainly not from the EPA. When you stack the deck, that's why you stack the deck.
I just quickly want to address 2 things. One is corruption, and the other is the situation with deportations. Let me get to the corruption first.
Yeah.
I think one of the clearest things that this administration is completely and openly corrupt. There's so many ways in which you can funnel money into the Trump organization. There's so many ways in which the Trump organization, in the guise of government or justice, can shake down everything and everyone. They've done it with legal institutions. I'm talking about lawyers who are now doing $100 million of pro bono work because Trump just shook them down with the threats of the government going after them. Same is true at ABC, CBS,
Yep.
and even at Comcast, et cetera. So against
Glad
that
you
backdrop,
mentioned them. And also, the pro bono work is not the kind of pro bono work you wish more lawyers would do. It's pro bono work within the confines of what Donald Trump says should be pro bono work.
to defend Trump in a case or whatever it might be. I mean, you're obligating yourself to all these things. So it was with great interest that when his first crack at the tariffs came out, which is just a way, I saw it as a way to shake down the world. And we think we even talked about the fact that essentially you're setting up a system of patronage where each one of these countries has to come and make a deal with you. And they can offer all kinds of different things, and they may or may not be good for America, but they must be good for Trump. Otherwise, they're going to have a stiff import tax.
I'm
that's
telling
going to
you,
be
these countries are calling us up,
Yeah.
kissing my ass.
And so, to that point, Michael, Vietnam had a 46% tariff imposed, yet now Vietnam is getting huge tariff relief and promises of more. What happened? 2 things. One, what modest tariffs there were or specific import blocks there were on American goods and services, they're gone. But more importantly, the Trump organization announcing a multi-billion-dollar series of projects in Vietnam. They
Yeah.
are partnering up in Vietnam and working on multiple investments worth billions of dollars in golf courses, hotels, and real estate projects in Vietnam. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about that kind of corruption.
The corruption is unprecedented. The emoluments violations, unprecedented. How he makes money. I mean, he's selling cryptocurrency, which is unheard of for a U.S. president to be profiting in that way off of his own name, and apparently just made a gazillion dollars doing it. It's easier to push around a country like Vietnam, which with due respect to Vietnam and the Vietnamese, is not as big a player on the stage as China is, as the European Union, as even Canada. We heard Mark Carney in accepting his victory the other night talk about how we're not going to be pushed around. We're going to find business elsewhere. We're going to avoid these tariffs because we have other options. Vietnam is much more easily influenced by this sort of a thing, and it will probably happen in other countries as well. But these tariffs were not about Vietnam, even though they do a lot of manufacturing, and we import a lot of some of cheaper goods as well as sort of mid-range goods from Vietnam. It's not the same player as some of these other bigger countries.
I mentioned then also the deportations.
Yeah. Did you guys talk about the vote that happened in the House committee?
I don't know that we did. Did we, Kim? Kim, somebody? No. Tell us.
Well, let me just mention it briefly
No,
because it has something
about
to
it.
do with
Please.
this. With this, there was an amendment in yesterday in a Judiciary Committee hearing where one of the amendments to, again, the minority doesn't have very much that they can do, but Representative Pramila Jayapal, who is a Democrat from Washington, who was and maybe still is the chair of the Progressive Caucus in there, she wanted to make sure while they were doing this immigration work that she put a bill in that ICE cannot detain nor can they deport any U.S. citizens under any circumstances. And GOP lawmakers in that committee killed that amendment. So this is U.S. citizens. So what they're saying is you should be able to deport U.S. citizens if you are ICE as well. And it's a bridge that has never been crossed.
So what is the likely outcome? Obviously, the president's indicated that he wants that, right?
Yeah, and the likely outcome is that it will go. I mean, if it comes out of Congress and no Republicans vote against it, then the courts will challenge it because it is blatantly unconstitutional, which hasn't stopped them before, but it is blatantly unconstitutional. It is a story that everybody who watches this show and listens to it should read and share, because this is really where we're getting into constitutional crisis when they're talking about rounding up, allowing ICE to round up U.S. citizens and deport them. It's saying, oh, you're a repeat offender, right? This three strikes law was ruled unconstitutional in some states, but this is the one strike law. If you are or the many strikes law, not only are we going to leave you in jail, we're going to send you to another country to go to jail. And this is
the other thing about ICE is that they're a sloppy crew, man. I mean, they just busted into that family in Oklahoma's house. They ransacked their house. They seized their belongings. She's a U.S. citizen, mother of 3 daughters. And the family is, she says, traumatized. Their stuff was wrongly subjected both to search and seizure. And now they said, oh, our bad. It was the wrong. It was the wrong.
As we see with the Abrego Garcia case too, these mistakes, they matter because they're people and they are against the law. And so I urge everybody to pay more attention to what happened in the Judiciary Committee in the House. And these are, to me, that was among the most jarring things I've heard in these 103 or 4 days.
All right. We are, I'm told that we have to say goodbye to you.
We do indeed. I'm sorry, but I'll be back. Again.
Okay. Well, don't say it with that tone of resignation. It's kind of
no.
Oh, girl, baby girl.
Well, I may have to
even play.
We can do our business here. I may have to pull a Jim Avila next Friday, but I'm not sure yet. I may.
Okay. Well, let us know. I mean, because you're irreplaceable, but we will replace you.
Thank you very much. And I know you will. Yeah.
Michael, thank you. So long, Michael Shure.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.